So let me start by saying good morning to a lot of old friends in the session. It's great to see you guys, and nice to meet all of you new people out there. I'm a little overawed here because the average IQ on this call is about 50 points above mine. So we've got this wealth of experience in the area which most of you know me as having done for the last 30 years, which is basically where data and technology meet communication and customer. So let me start with a quick round of introductions. First, with my old and dear friend Vivek Bhargava, who's the founder of ProfitWheel, which is the sponsor of this series. Prior to ProfitWheel, and to that matter, to this point, Vivek is also the head of the performance group of Dentsu International in India. All the digital part of that comes under Vivek. And he founded a company called iProspect. Well, it was called Communicated 2 when he founded it. It became iProspect later. And he led that for many, many years and is kind of recognized as Mr. Digital Marketing in India. He's also an angel investor. And amongst other things, plays professional level table tennis, I think, from what I can make out, and cycles, and is writing a book on happiness. So that's Vivek. You'll be hearing a fair amount from him as we go along. The second introduction, Vivek, could you put up a hand for those who don't know you, so people who kind of recognize who you are? Great, thanks. The second introduction is Rajesh Jain, who I first heard of, I think it was about 20, 30 years ago, when he sold his company, India World. And we promptly renamed our company .com because he sold IndiaWorld.com for what seemed like an obscene amount of money at the time. So I think a lot of companies got renamed .com at that time, taking from his lead. He then went on to start Netco, which is now today's is Asia's largest marketing technology company, and is quite a dominant force in the martech area. Quite aside from everything else, Rajesh is a prolific writer. And if you haven't discovered his blog, rajeshjain.com, it's well worth the doing. Just go and have a look at that. I read it regularly, and I find it helps me understand a lot of things about life in general, and certainly marketing in particular. That's Rajesh Jain. Miten Sampath is relatively new in my life. I only met him yesterday for the first time, but it has impressed the heck out of me in the short time that I've seen him. He now runs corporate strategy at Cred. Prior to this, he was the chief strategy officer at Times Internet. And before that, he was in the Bay Area, worked in San Francisco. We were head of product strategy at Newstar, where I think he spent a lot of time trying to help people on the internet understand where their users came from. He's a graduate from Virginia Tech, and like Rajesh and Vivek, is a prolific angel investor. So I think at some point in the course of the conversation today, we should ask these guys for tips on what spaces they're looking at, if not actual companies. With that as a background, I'm going to hand over to Rajesh and to Vivek to take us through two presentations. We'll structure this conversation in the following way. We'll start off with two presentations, one by Rajesh first and then Vivek. And then we'll start discussing the ideas which the presentations suggested. I'll be asking a few questions, and I'd be happy if you guys could add a few more questions from your side. With that, over to you, Rajesh.
Thanks a lot, Ajay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. What I'll do in the next 7 odd minutes is essentially walk you through the core idea of how a few customers make a significant difference to the profitability of a business. So I call this idea velvet rope marketing. It's about creating a better business by focusing on your best customers, because all customers are not equal. Some, as George Orwell said, are more equal than others. So if you look at the power law of marketing, essentially it's a power law curve where the best customers on the left account typically for 60% of revenues. The 20% best customers, 60% revenue, and in many cases, 200% of profits. If you see this whale curve, this is from a book by Sunil Gupta, Driving Digital Strategy. The top 20% best customers can account for 200% of profits. It's a theme Vivek will build on later. And then you have this long tail, which essentially if you add the servicing costs and the acquisition costs, they can actually detract from the profitability and bring it down. So that's the power law curve. The focus on the best customers, very, very critical. Now, in numerical terms, here's a simple example of what really the numbers actually mean, the importance and the impact of focusing on best customers. So I've taken a typical scenario where top 20% customers generate 60% revenue, a business with 60% GM, 50% costs, leaving profitability at 10% of revenue. So now if you take these top 20% customers, if you can grow the revenue by say 10, 15, 20%, you see that blue line, 20% increase in revenue of just the best customers can drive a 68% increase in profits. This is really the power of best customers. And I think that's why every business needs to look at these customers, create differentiated experiences. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is what I see as the action Trimurti of profitability. How do you protect the best customers? How do you persuade the rest? Okay, so that other 60, 80%, whatever it may be there in your business, to essentially become more like the best. And then Vivek will discuss this in much greater detail later on, prospecting the next. How do you get the next best customers from the universe which is out there? Miten from Cred is doing a fantastic job at that in picking up exactly the most profitable customers, and we'll hear a lot more about this later on. And this idea really is what I call as velvet rope marketing. It's like the red carpet that is rolled out with the balustrades when you go in and check in business class whenever you travel next. Or at Disneyland or wherever. So what velvet rope marketing is about is how do you stratify customers, provide experience differentiation, treat the best customers, not just focused on loyalty, but like royalty, creating experiences which are friction-free, give them easy access, exclusivity, personalization. Focus on these customers. Of course, technology can let you do it for everyone, but make these customers feel special because best customers tend to sign up first, spend more, stay longer. They are serviced easier because they're very familiar with your platform. And they also spread wider. We'll take that up again later. This is applicable across industries, across whatever business you're running. Do your analysis and you'll find the power of best customers. Now, how do you go about doing that? So here are the 10 steps. I'll run through this quickly. Collect all the data that you can for your customers, offline, online, put it into a customer data platform, CDP. Then the analytics. How can you use the transaction data? So essentially the anonymized customer ID, the date and value of transactions to calculate customer lifetime value. How can then you use all the other data to decode the customer genome, what we think of as the best customer genome? So once you know your best customers from the CLV, what are the attributes about these customers that differentiates them? Again, Vivek will show you some of this a little bit later on. And then when your best customers are on your site, do you know that they are actually visiting? Can you get alerts in real time? If your best customers are not engaged with you, can you get early warnings about churn? And then the actions. What are the things that you can do to retain and develop best customers? What are the campaigns that you can run? How do you get the best to refer others like them? Very powerful. Best beget the best. So you'll get more like them. How do you nudge some from the rest to becoming the best? Okay, so you have this long tail using the genome. Can you identify early signals about who the next best customers are going to be? And then acquiring the next best via an industry first, which again Vivek will discuss, the adtech martech bridge. So for the first time, combining the worlds of adtech, which is about acquisition, and the world of martech, which is about customer engagement, combining data from both of these platforms. And of course, then finally tracking change in future revenue over time. What I think of as the net predicted revenue, which gives you an impact of your marketing program. So a couple of quick dashboards to show you. This is again, all the data that you can get about best customers, how many are there, how have they performed over time, what percentage of best customers or rest from the long tail are migrating towards the best. These are some important metrics for you to be able to actually track. And finally, when you think about velvet rope marketing, the focus needs to really be on maximizing profit share, not just market share. Once upon a time, market share was equal to profit share, but it's not necessarily the case now. And Miten will actually dig deeper into that, how a small percentage of customers actually account for a disproportionate share of spend and profits. So as a business, what should you be doing? Of course, identify your best customers, see how you can maximize their spend. You will do that by ensuring that you give them amazing experiences, keeping them forever, getting referrals of their friends and family, then using the genome idea to get more like them. Vivek will talk about that. And that's the flywheel that you need to be able to get going. So essentially what you're doing is, how can you get the maximum best customers in a category, the best customers in an entire category, maximize their lifetime spend. And that's the trick to really maximizing profit share. And if you can do that right, you essentially take away the oxygen of growth from your competition. On that note, over to Vivek.
Thanks, Rajesh. I'll just quickly share my screen. So before we start, I'm just going to give you a quick story how ProfitWheel came about. So I had invested in this company which Netcore acquired about a year ago. And I was one of the lucky few in the investors who was allowed to join Netcore on the cap table. And me and Ajay got talking during the lockdown. So we would talk quite often, almost like weekly basis for an hour. And we were discussing, what are the biggest problems in the world to be solved? Although we ignored hunger and poverty, but we said, okay, if we can connect the adtech world with the martech world, that would be one of the biggest problems to solve. So that's how it came about. And it seemed very obvious. So people wonder, why hasn't it been done, right? So there are a lot of challenges because of which it is not easy to do it. There are 30, 40 technologies on either side, which companies like Google, Salesforce, Adobe have acquired, and connecting them is not easy. But we said, okay, if we can do this connection, I think it'll be a very exciting opportunity. So we started off with a partnership with Dentsu and Netcore and said, okay, if we take a person and the advertising data that we have over that person is taken all the way till the time he purchases a product and then advocates a product, that would be a very, very powerful bridge that will actually create tremendous amount of efficiencies at both the advertising side as well as on the marketing side. So let me give you an example just to elaborate this more. Suppose there is a person who's browsing the web. He sees an ad of a pizza, ignores it, sees an ad of a burger, ignores it. Then he comes across this ad of a salad. And then he clicks on the salad, installs Swiggy. Now the challenge is a lot of this data is lost. So what happens is, if the best offer of Swiggy at that point in time going on is 500 rupees off on a pizza, then what happens is that that's the offer that user gets. And the chances of him then ordering his first order becomes slim because that information was not passed on to the martech world. And if I go back 15, 20 years, I still remember I used to work for a bank and we used to actually capture the keywords people were searching for. So there was a keyword called Novo chairs, and that Novo chairs keywords were dental chairs that costed 15 lakh rupees. And the loan amount used to be 50 lakhs instead of 50,000 rupees. The regional sales manager would attend to that call because that call made all the difference. Now, the thing is, you fast for 15 years, that information is still not being passed on from the advertising world into the martech world and vice versa. So I think that's one problem that I think ProfitWheel is attempting to solve. We have solved versions of it, which is already giving a lot of efficiencies. But when we solve it completely, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities there. The second sort of extension of that thing is that you can't do this for hundreds of millions of people. You will do it for lesser number of people who give you most of the profits. So what Rajesh talked about, that it can be focused on that 2%, 20% of the customers, and then sort of even create more information on them. With the cookies going away, data partnerships are going to be important, but most data partnerships are with hundreds of millions of users. What if you could do data partnership with lesser number of users, maybe a few thousand Centurion card users or few thousand people who buy art in India? Those partnerships can actually deliver tremendous amount of profits for a lot of categories like luxury, travel abroad, education abroad, etc. So I think it's a combination of connecting both the worlds and then going after niche users, which I think will deliver tremendous amount of value to people. So our technology works very simple. I'm a firm believer of a lean startup where you start off with one problem and just solve it with a minimum MVP. So what our MVP does is it takes your existing data, whether it's in a hash format or Facebook custom audiences, and then creates this awesome insights of what the psychographics of a user looks like. And then based on that, we can actually activate media on it, but also expand it to other mediums, and furthermore, expand it to other markets. There have been some awesome insights of how outdoor enthusiast in US becomes a cooking enthusiast in India. So when you want to expand into Middle East or Southeast Asia, the insights that you have about the consumers, your best customers in India, can actually help you expand in those markets very, very effortlessly. So the way we do it is very simple. We get your first party data in a hash format. Mithane would say it's SHA-256, so it's very, very safe and secure. Or we actually just connect to the customer audiences on Facebook. Divide them into 3 cohorts, right? Your high value customers, your best customers, and the medium value customers and low value customers. Find out what attributes the high value customers have, and then basically filter them out and target them through media. And what we've seen is that when you are able to do this, you are able to reduce your CAC, but also the lifetime value of that customer improves substantially because you are now targeting very, very niche audiences who are your best customers. So we basically made a product portfolio of few products in the early phases. One is just to know your customers. You put the data in, we'll show you a graph which basically gives you psychographics of those guys. And it's just awesome to look at it first time that what kind of insights we can get about the psychographics of a person just by matching, let's say, Facebook custom audiences. Then we have something which activates media on Amazon and all the Facebook properties right now. But the other 2 interesting products we built for one of our partners was Market Expander, because this company actually takes domestic brands and takes them global. So our partnership with them allows us to launch in multiple countries simultaneously and also expand them to platforms like Snap and Twitter and other things. Let me show you one example. So basically we took high value customers and we took low value customers, were one of our clients. And what we did was we found that there are psychographics of each of these people where some of them are common, right? So a person who's buying a car is going to be an auto enthusiast. So both high value as well as low value could be an auto enthusiast. But when we drilled further, we found, so this graph are two charts. One is from left to right is the affinity of the person, and from top to bottom is the size of the audience. So although the thrill seeker audience is very small, they seem to have a lot of affinity for the high value customers of the client. So just imagine this thrill seekers, Facebook has almost 1.5 million odd interest. So this thrill seekers would divide into hundreds of interest. What if you could find a way to target them? 15 years ago, when I set up a performance agency, we had a very simple thing. What is the difference between digital marketing and conventional marketing? Digital marketing is about maximizing efficiencies, while conventional marketing is about minimizing waste. So if you have 100 rupee budget and the thrill seeker audience is only 3 rupees, that's the total audience. Your best 3 rupee ROI will be spending the first 3 rupees on the thrill seekers, then the next audience, then the next audience, till the time your 100 rupee gets over. If you use this philosophy in media activation, the ROI that you receive is significant. And I think that's what we are trying to prove with a lot of people. Again, what we wanted was an MVP that can start within a couple of hours. So if we get a link up to the Facebook or it has data, straight away our technology will create the cohorts. We can create a split test. Facebook has this awesome test where you can actually take the same audience and divide them in 2, and one audience will not see the other person's ads. And within a couple of hours, this test actually can go live. It's a free test, obviously. I think the power of technology has to be seen and experienced. So in 15 days time, you'll see that one single change in the algorithm. So AI is made up of data, algorithm, and machine learning. Just one single algorithm. This is just the first of the algorithms that taking your best customers, what kind of outlier it can create for partners. So in a way, that's a nutshell what we do. But I think one of the biggest challenges is that how do you increase profits of clients? I think over the last 20 years of digital marketing that I've done, my focus has always been that how do we increase the profitability of clients? And if that's the service we can provide, profit as a service, I think we can make the difference and move the needle for a lot of partners. Yeah. So I think that's a quick 6.5 minute presentation from me. Over to you, Ajay.
Thanks, Vivek. Most impressive. So, Miten, what do you think? Yeah, you've been hearing this, I think, perhaps for the first time, maybe the second. What do you think of the ideas? The velvet rope marketing, the idea behind finding profitable customers, and then the adtech, martech bridge, and all the cool stuff that ProfitWheel is planning to do.
Firstly, thank you for having me, Vivek, Rajesh, and Ajay. Appreciate it. Um, I have actually been living this in an odd way because what I was doing at Times Internet was I was going after a very mass audience, 500 million users, and kind of what I'm doing in Cred is actually focusing on a very small segment of the Indian population. Right? If you look at mostly what most tech companies have been building is they're all building for scale, given the size and the opportunity, the perceived opportunity rather. I think what I realized after I left Times Internet was that the profit pool, as Rajesh said, is sort of sits with a smaller segment. It all depends obviously on segment to segment. But one of the key things that I realized is that the profit pool in certain financial services sits in a very small pool of the entire population. And so what we're doing with Cred is we're focusing on really that top 5% of the most credit-worthy users of India. And what I mean by credit-worthy is people who have a very high credit score. It's a very specific objective metric that you can say, it's hard to say, are you credit-worthy, right? How do we measure that? And the good news is that there are multiple credit bureaus, and each of us has a score in each of these credit bureaus. And so we take that as a filter, as a way to say, look, these are the most trustworthy users. Our ability, therefore, to monetize them, to offer them services, to build a product and an experience and a club for them is really differentiated. So in many ways, I think that the entire thesis of what this conversation is about, velvet rope marketing, which is again focusing on the top of the monetization opportunity, and in terms of what the total audience is really what we're building at Cred. And I think in terms of how you go about it, what do you do, what are the specific tactics, happy to kind of get into more detail. But I think that completely 100% agree with the fact that it's always a small segment of your audience that ends up being the disproportionate profit driver, because they're the ones where you have the strongest set of engagement and the strongest retention, and those are the ones you got to keep, no matter what. And that's where I think the and it's not easy to understand. I mean, I think a lot of, like, one of the things I see when I talk to entrepreneurs and friends is that everyone talks in averages, right? That's the wrong way to look at a business. You got to look at the median, right? What is happening with that audience? What are they doing? Are they retaining? Are they referring? Are they transacting frequently? And all those kinds of things are critical. So I was little I can disagree with in both of what Rajesh and Vivek spoke about.
Great, thanks so much. So, Vivek, how do you react to what Miten just said?
So when somebody agrees with me 100%, then it's very difficult for me to react anything to it. But I think it's just wonderful. I think this concept is going to become more and more popular, because I think we have gone and told people we have 1.2 billion users, etc., or population in India, but actually there is a significant population that per se does not have that much consumption. So I think when you look at niche categories, I was reading this D2C report for direct-to-consumer brands, and there are going to be so many new premium brands coming up, but each one of them will be targeting a few million users in India. And the thing is, you need to divide India into those 500 cohorts and find out the best customers for each of those brands in those cohorts. Just targeting, they say that I would love to target the entire population of the world. The problem is I don't have enough budget. So if you have limited budget, then it's better to go for that maximizing efficiency strategy. And I think that's what companies like Cred are doing. And I think I'm hoping that this actually is done by most companies, because they can really increase their profits if they do that.
I'll give you a few data points, just anecdotes, right? So, if you look at the India what should I say, spend data, right? If you look at credit card, debit card, UPI, I'll give you one data point which will be very sort of, stark in terms of being able to understand where the profit pools might be. There are 650 million active debit card users, and there are about 50 million active credit card. There's actually 30 million active credit card users who have about 60 million credit cards, right? And if you look at the total spend on debit cards, and if you look at the total spends on credit cards, they're the same, right? So you look at the size of the audience difference, right? 20x the audience on debit cards, but the same level of spend. Now think about it. If you're a financial institution or if you're a fintech company, which flow is, the flow in which you want to fish, right? These are two rivers, right? Where is the density of profitability higher? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And that's sort of what we ask ourselves as we are building our business, which is, what audience do we want to build for? And actually selecting that in the first place is again very important, right? Because if you kind of go very mass, then again it becomes hard. So we are probably like a template of what the message here is. Obviously may not be as applicable to most companies, because most companies still have to focus on a wider audience.
So for what it's worth, let me give you a couple of examples from over time and over space. So the first example over time, about 25 years ago, Citibank was a client of mine, and we looked at their database, and we found a very small segment of Diners Club, which was then the leading credit card in India. Well, it was the charge card, but it was the leading charge card in India. Between them, they accounted for about 40% of all India's spend, either in their roles as corporates or in their individual capacity. So we had about 45,000 people who represented 40% of the spends of, call it 600 or 800 million people that we were at that time. That's over time. Over space, Coke, you drink it, right? And most people drink maybe a bottle with a meal, right? From UK data on Nectar, on the Sainsbury's program, there's a very small number of people who buy 60 liters. This is not commercial purchases. This is individual home purchases, who buy 60 liters of Coke per week. Now, I don't know what you can do with 60 liters of Coke a week. I mean, at 11 liters, 10 liters a day, even if you bathe in it, how do you use it? But it gives you a sense that this seems to be pretty universal, both across time and across space. Rajesh, what do you think? Do you think it's a universal thing, or do you think it's limited to a few industries?
Yeah, I think it's across industries. I think what we have seen on the data that we've analyzed are, if you leave aside sort of the subscription businesses like Netflix, where everyone's pretty much paying the same, but then the differences come in longevity and hours consumed and so on. But for transactional businesses, it's either typically 10-80, where 10% customers will account for 80% of revenue, especially in mobile gaming or in broking. And in e-com, retail, etc., you'll find this 20-60 rule pretty much universally applicable. And just to building on, therefore, what Miten said, essentially what a business needs to do, therefore, is to almost look at two SBUs. You need a separate SBU just to focus on your best customers. Okay, it's not about averages. I think the great point that Miten said, because if you just think about it, in the best, 20 are giving you 60% revenue. So 1% is giving you 3%. And then in the rest, you have 80% giving you the other 40%, 0.5. So it's a 6x difference straight away there. And then you have the referrals. I mean, we don't do referrals very well in India, but I think getting people to refer their friends and family, you can have a 10x difference versus the sort of medians or the averages that are there across the space. I think that is the real opportunity. It's almost, and I think airlines and hotels do it very well, banks maybe in some cases, but in most other businesses, it's basically what I call the difference between sort of communism and capitalism. Okay, in communism, everyone is the same. Everyone's treated the same. In capitalism, you have differences. And really, that's what businesses need to think about. You want inequality. You want to focus on your best customers and give them an amazing experience.
So how do you do that, Rajesh? How do you create an amazing experience?
I think you start first by identifying who your best customers are. I think that's the most important thing. The CLV, the customer lifetime value. There are many ways to do it wrong. I think models like what Peter Fader from Wharton and others have talked about are really what should be used. They build on recency and frequency and monetary value RFM, but they're very sophisticated models which just using the 3 data points of anonymized ID, transaction date, transaction value can actually give you CLV, forward-looking predictive value across all your customers. Once you get that, then it's really multiple, it's a CEO level function where you need to get different groups in your company to start thinking for these 5%, 10%, 20% customers. How can I use technology? Plus, if it's an offline business, how do I use customer service, etc., to create differentiated experiences? Simple example. We've all watched lots of movies, Inox, PVR, etc. In most cases, most of the times when you go to the movies, they have all our data, which movies we have watched, etc. But every experience is like your first time experience. Okay, so it's like that movie 50 First Dates. You wake up with no memory of what has happened previously, and that's typically what's happening with these experiences. Now imagine a new movie releases on a Friday, and then you get an email in the morning which says on Thursday, which says that Rajesh, you're part of our Velvet Rope marketing program, our exclusive club. And it's the brand who has decided, it's not opt-in, it's not based on points or anything. It's the brand based on CLV who's decided. We have actually, we know you love this movie based on your past data. We have reserved 3 seats for you for Saturday, 5:30, last row center seats, because we know that's the favorite seats that you want. All you have to do is to just click here and pay the money in the next 2 hours and the seats here are yours. As opposed to trying to remember on a Thursday morning, going to the app, making the bookings. If you forget about it, then, come Thursday night, your spouse will be telling you, why haven't you booked the tickets? I mean, we have watched movies where all of us are sitting separately. That's not Velvet Rope marketing experience. That's really the opportunity which is there for brands.
So I think what Rajesh says, within you guys have been building out with the loyalty program that Cred has done, right? In a way, that's the fundamental belief behind Cred.
Yeah, so so what we do is, our fundamental goal is to basically reward our users for being good on their financial sort of behavior, right? So fundamentally, we're saying, look, we're going to remind you to pay your bill on time because of multiple reasons. One is it's good for your credit score. One is it's good for your wallet because you don't end up paying interest, all that kind of stuff. So we're a guardian for you. And then what we do is, as a sort of, what should I say, a prize, we give you loyalty points, which we call Cred coins, which is our currency for points, in addition to what you might get for paying your credit card bill to your credit card company, itself. So Amex, for example, will give you points for spending. We will give you points for paying back. And the entire idea is that this creates a level of stickiness between us and our users. So when they come in, when they pay every month, they have some asset sitting with us. And then we have a store and a rewards program where we work with some of the best brands trying to reach, this audience, and we're able to sort of connect the dots. Because I think one of the most interesting things that we've noticed is that I think, as Rajesh said, right, that example is one of those sort of dream examples of what we want to be able to try and achieve. The real challenge is getting users' attention, right? There is so much noise, and there is so many brands talking to you. There is so much media coming at you that my inbox is full with stuff. So how am I going to get the user's attention, right? That really is a big question that we all need to kind of think about as well. So what is the channel? What is the method? What is the flow in which you're presenting this to the user? Kind of then becomes, almost as important, perhaps more important than the message itself is a method in which, and the medium on which it's delivered. And that's something we do, we think, in a slightly more elevated manner, where, because you have a cadence, you come to our product every couple of weeks to see your bill, to figure out whether charges are appropriate. And when you pay, right at the end of that pay, the landing page you land on takes you straight into the reward section. And then the reward section is very contextualized to our audience. And so for us, by the way, just
in fact, I've come from a direct marketing background, and a 2% response rate means a 98% non-response rate, which
that's
means
correct. So
98% of
I'll
people
tell you a
will
metric.
ignore you.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a metric that we track. Okay. And so by the way, one of the underlying questions here is, how do you retain your most monetizing customers? How do you engage them? Okay. So we have an obsessive focus on metrics and instrumentation. So in fact, one of the metrics that we track is, as soon as you come into the product, you're a new customer, a new member, you come in, we want to make sure that you experience our rewards. If you don't experience our rewards, we know that the likelihood that you'll become the LTV sort of math on you and the potential with you as a new member is going to be much lower versus if you've experienced the rewards, right? So we actually we have a reward redemption rate, metric, RRR metric that we track on an ongoing basis. It's very, very high. I'm not at the liberty to share the numbers, but it's super high. And if it drops for any cohort, then we go back and study everything. Hey, what happened? What was the channel through which they came? What are are there some sort of underlying metrics or attributes about those users that we can understand better? What else can we do to make sure that they come to that level? So it's a full funnel visibility that becomes important.
Very cool. I'm going to change tack a bit now, right? Whenever I hear these stories about new entrepreneurial ideas, it sort of gives me, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And, as I'm thinking this through, Vivek, you've been a successful entrepreneur, right? Why would you start again? And because here you are, you're moving from first class and business class to doing a startup, hard-earned money is going into what is potentially a deep hole. Why would you do this?
So I think it's a very difficult question, right, Ajay? I think most entrepreneurs who have gone through it once know how and what a painful journey it is. So once you have a little bit of money, then it takes a lot to want to do it again. But let me give you a couple of thoughts, right? I think at some level, you need to find this why, right? So when I was having this conversation with Rajesh, I said, I still remember I was a 10-year-old boy sitting on a dinner table, and my father had told me one thing, that if you know the difference between job and entrepreneurship. I said, no. I was just worried that am I going to get batting in the evening or not? That's what my thought was, right? And he said that, if you have a job, your salary is 100 rupees, you have to make sure that you spend less than that. But if you're an entrepreneur, you can actually spend as much as you want. You just make sure that you earn more than that. But actually, money was not the motivating factor this time around. I said that, right now, advertising and marketing has a budget, right? So you have to spend less than the budget. Well, what if we can shift that advertising and cost and marketing cost to the balance sheet? Then it becomes the cost of sale. That means I can spend $1 billion a day for a brand. As long as I give the ROAS they require, they don't need to give me a budget. So I said that the why for ProfitWheel is that I want to shift the advertising and marketing cost as a cost of sale into the balance sheet, right? So the way my conversation with my father was, that's my why for ProfitWheel. That's what we're trying to do, that we want the advertising and marketing cost to become a cost of sale where no client needs to give us any budget ever, right? Second thing is that, I've always seen entrepreneurship as this trapeze artist in a circus who's doing all these somersault and twists. The first time around, you don't have a safety net. So you're capable of doing 5 somersaults, you do 4, because if you fall down, you're going to die. If you're in a second, third different startups, then you have the safety net available to you. So now I know I'm capable of doing 10 somersaults today. I'm going to attempt 20. Because if I fall, I'm going to fall on the net, climb up again. I'm going to try 20 again. When I achieve 20, I'm going to try 40. I'm going to try 80. So the fact of the matter is, if I fast forward the next 20 years of my life, I could be doing thousands of somersaults and getting claps for the rest of my life, because it doesn't worry me. Because the more and more somersaults I do, the more and more safety nets come up. So I think there are 2 ways to live a life, right? That once you are in that comfort zone, especially if you have a safety net available to you that I have today, then life mein gulati aur marne ki zarurat hai. So I think that's the purpose of entrepreneurship, right? To take up a big problem, attempt to solve it. But today I can embark on a problem which even the largest companies in the world are attempting to solve, because I have a safety net, right? I can punch above my weight, give it the best shot. If I succeed, it'll be awesome. If I don't, there is a safety net, right? I don't have to worry where my next meal is coming from. So if I, with that comfort, if I don't give it the best shot and try to change the world, then I'm wasting, in a way, my life.
That's a good one. Of course, Rajesh, you had a different take on this, right? When you got up at 5:30 the next morning after waking up with a bank account, which made everybody green with envy.
Yes, Ajay, that was almost 20 plus years ago. And what my wife Bhavna said to me is that you have to think of yourself as custodians of God's money on earth. God has given you this money for a purpose. And don't think about what's there in the bank. Our lives should not change. Get back to business as usual. And that's what I like, the thrill of building new things, sort of the 0 to 1 excitement. Most of the times I fail. I sat recently and counted. I've succeeded maybe 2.5, 3 times. I've failed probably 30 times. But that's life. I mean, how do you go about, like what Vivek said, it's mountains beyond mountains. So you climb one mountain and there's another one waiting to be climbed. You don't see that till you're down. You've got to start climbing.
That is
Here's
true.
one quick thing, Ajay. Yesterday I got one of those WhatsApp. It says it's called the law of wasted effort. So every time a tiger runs after a kill, he fails 75% of the times. Half the fish eggs basically eaten up and sort of die, right? Nature understands this law of wasted effort extremely well. But some of the human beings have this thing that if I'm going to fail 75% of times, then I should not make an attempt. But if the tiger would do that, he would die of hunger, right? So the law of wasted effort, the nature understands it. Some of the other human beings have a lot of difficulty in understanding that concept.
Very cool. Lovely. Never heard of that before. It's a really lovely idea. Vivek, but that gets me onto another question which I have for you, a rather blunt question. See, you're getting into a space where you're saying I can do something smarter than Google and Facebook can, right? Effectively. I mean, these are the giants, Amazon, Google, Facebook. They're the smartest. They've got the deepest pockets. And now you're trying to get into space where you can be even smarter than them without that kind of money. Does that keep you uptight? Because it's not picking a fight with the littlest guy in the class. You're going up against the biggest bully, right?
So as I said, right, when you're trying these thousands of somersaults in the air, so let's see. First of all, I don't think I'm competing with Googles of the world. The last, when I saw Alphabet's market cap, it was 1,400 billion. So if I become 1/100th of that, that will still be 140, and 1,000 of that will be 1.4, right? So I'm not a greedy guy. A couple of billion should be good enough for me, right? So that's the long and short of it. But the thing is that I look at it, right? First of all, when you optimize a platform like Google, right, you're optimizing Google, but then you have Facebook, then you have other platforms. So you need a layer of optimization on which rests above all these platforms, right? Because that's the first thing. Second thing is the whole philosophy, right? When you're going after a lesser number of customers, a company that has 3 billion plus users across different platforms they use, then they need to do advertising for everyone, while you need to do velvet rope for a few of them, right? So companies like ProfitWheel will focus on the few rather than focus on hundreds of millions of users. But I think if you ask me, right, I think it's, so let's say if I run a campaign and it has 2000% ROAS, that means the spends will be very low. Now that's actually detrimental to any publisher's interest, right? So if you have billions of users and if that 2% of the users are giving you all the profits, then what do you do? So the fact of the matter is that I think the outcome-based business model is something which makes us align to our partners. So if I deliver a CAC, which is 1,000th of what the current CAC is for Miten, I said, I saved you 900 rupees. I'm going to share the 900 rupees with you. He'll be more than willing to do so. But if you are a publisher, then reducing something significantly actually detrimental to your interest. So if somebody has a 10 crore budget for me and I can achieve the same outcome in a 1 crore budget, but I'm going to get now 10% of that 1 crore instead of 10% of the 10 crores, then what's my incentive to make it 1 crore, right? The problem is that's how the ecosystem of the world is structured, where we are incentivized to reach out to more people rather than less people. So I think our innovation is not only on the technology front, but it's also on how we're going to work with our partners, where we actually work with sort of a price per outcome mindset, where our interests are aligned to our partner rather than work as how the ecosystem currently works. And I think the ecosystem itself can make a lot more money rather than aligning ourselves on how much spends are being done.
Interesting. So Ashish asks, does the Pareto principle apply even in the market development strategy where products are new to the audience, example, a niche segment in adtech, with less data available to the business and reach being a critical factor? So Vivek, would you like to take that?
So I think our tech, Ajay, unfortunately at this point in time, it doesn't. Because what it does is that if you have a new product, you don't know who your best customers are, then for me to find out psychographics of who they are is difficult. But there are some correlations you can find. So if you have a product that sells, let's say, a 500 rupees soap, are there other products in the luxury segment which are 10x of the normal soap price, which have certain set of users, and those are the users you would like to target? So automatically what will happen is that if you have your data, then the efficiencies is awesome. But if you will have, then you have to find surrogates, which will not be as efficient, but over a period of time, you'll build those customers. But then you can build them into different states, different countries, different platforms. So for machine learning to work, unfortunately, it needs data. So the more data you have, the better value our tech delivers immediately. The lesser data you have, the lesser value it delivers. But still, the lesser value is significantly more value than no value, right? But if you just pray and pray, then you're going to get less value in any case. So our tech will definitely give you better value. But of course, if you have your data, we can give you really, really awesome value.
So while we're on the subject of data, Rajesh, how do companies calculate CLV, customer lifetime value, and decode the best customer genome? I mean, how does that all work? Because for what Vivek is saying, gets the right guys in the door. Now that you got the right guys in the door, how do you grow them?
So there are very good models available for CLV calculation. I think some of the simple ways to do it, which are not necessarily the best, but they can actually get you going, is to take, say you have data for the last 3 years. You can basically take the average spend that is happening per transaction and number of transactions. And then that gives you a forward-looking metric on what to expect probably from that customer in the next, say, 3 months or 12 months. But there are more sophisticated models which will give greater weightage to the recency of a transaction. They also look at what is the frequency at which a customer is actually spending money on. So RFM models are a good way. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, Peter Fader and others have worked on very good CLV models, which can actually give you the numbers. And so essentially it's a mathematical model. You put in the data and then you'll get your CLV for the forward-looking period. And that then automatically gives you the segmentation for who your best customers are and so on. For the best customer genome, basically look at all the other data that you have. So the demographic data, the behavioral data, identity data, all of this other stuff. And that's where AI can come in. So CLV is telling you who your best customers are. Now you can take all the data for the best customers and see what's common. And that's really your genome that is there for the best customer. Again, AI-based models are very, very good at doing this. And what Vivek actually showed earlier, where you can even now take the hashed identities of the best customers, and you get their what their interests are through what he showed, the Dentsu Marketing Cloud. So there are multiple ways to do this. I think all of this is really, today technology lets you do this. The question really comes is, once we are able to do this, what next? And that is where the exciting part happens. How do you attract more like the best? What can you do with the best? What Miten spoke about earlier, the rewards program for the best. How do you have that engagement going? How do you ensure there's no churn? How do you get them to refer more customers? That's where you get the flywheel going.
So my old friend Dilpreet asks, what are some of the qualitative KPIs brands should track to assess the health of the business? I'm assuming along with qualitative, there'll be quantitative KPIs, but let's stick to qualitative for now. So what are some of the qualitative KPIs brands should track? So Vivek, would you like to take that or?
Sure. I think, Miten mentioned, right? So I think each business should decide what are the things that make the difference in that business, right? So for them, retention is important. And, taking the rewards program and making sure that they get some engagement in the rewards program is essential, right? So I think every business, so I think the first thing the way I would look at it is, right, if you have your best customers and you know that what handle of that best customers increases your profitability, automatically what happens is they'll tell you what KPI you should track. And I think the thing is you should not have too many KPIs. You just have a couple of KPIs which actually move the needle for your brand or your business. That's adequate. I think the challenge is a lot of people have these hundreds of things that they're tracking, but only one or two of them, like, the same, right? 20-80 Pareto rule, but now you talk about 20-200 rule, right? Where that two KPIs will make 80%, 90% difference in your outcome that your business wants to achieve, then those are things that you will find. But I think every business should have a KPI, a couple of them they're tracking, and that comes depending on the business, right? I think Mithen's example was a great example.
I just want to add a little bit of more color to your point, to this question. I think boiling down to just a subset of, like, a small set of metrics is a process. I think early on, unless obviously you're a established, well-known, well-understood product, then you can boil it down into some of the sort of core metrics that kind of impact everything. I think if you're slightly more early stage in terms of, kind of discovering the true signals that impact, that majorly impact the outcomes, I think it's okay to have probably 5 metrics instead of 1 or 2, or maybe even 10, until you kind of figure out where the impact is. Because I think one of the things about delivering over the internet is that, your users could actually be coming from anywhere. And I think that it could be cutting across segments, it could be cutting across various different sort of attributes, because there's no access limitations, right? Everybody can access the product because it's over the internet. So I think it's, in my view, what I've seen is I like to see a lot more at the beginning, and then sort of over time weed out the impact, because the impact of some of those things is not that big, and so you don't want to worry about that too much, unless it's a really big RCA situation where something really went wrong.
Ajay, just to add one point to what Vivek and Mithen have said, a very interesting metric, actually, when I showed the CLV curve. Okay, so essentially what that is doing is showing you the CLV for every customer that you've calculated through what I talked about earlier. The area under the curve actually is giving you the predicted revenue in the future. So as you're doing your various activities, see how the curve sort of shifts upwards. And the delta is really showing you the impact of your marketing programs. So net predicted revenue can be another very powerful metric, because it's a forward-looking metric.
That's very cool. So this leads me into my last but one question, which is, what is the impact this has on a business? So this thinking, is it going to make a 5% difference in my profit? Will be a 50% difference? I mean, what is the impact? Is it meaningful? Will I get a raise? Will I get a bonus because I did it?
You'll get market cap. You'll get market cap. That's what you'll get.
You'll get market cap.
Sorry.
So if you're an entrepreneur, that's something which you look for, right? So Vivek and Rajesh are getting very excited by that idea. But seriously, for the business, you'll get market cap because you get more free cash flow. But
I'll give you.
What do you expect?
I'll give you one example that comes to mind from another business, not cred, but if you look at the smartphone market, and if you look at the profitability in the smartphone market, and if you look at the cash balances of the top 10 companies, I think you'll notice that one company has taken the disproportionate share, like unimaginable share of the profits of that entire market, and that is Apple. Even if you look at Samsung's profitability on the smartphone business, is much lower. And then there's really a long tail of smartphone manufacturers who have scale, right? So number of shipments will be big, but what is your profitability? So that's really the difference in terms of segment focus, retention focus. And if you look at Apple, right, you look at the once you're an Apple user, the likelihood you go back and become an Android user, just talking about smartphones, is very, very low, right? Because over time, they keep keeping you in the ecosystem. They keep adding little things. Of course, and they suck money out of you, right? Like now they don't ship you a charger with the phone, right? So now that's $29 more. Then now they've sort of gone, completely wireless. So now you need to can't buy wired headphones. You have to buy wireless headphones. So they're getting more of your wallet. But I think if you just look at the smartphone sort of profit pool, that's the best example of this whole thing in action.
Rajesh, you want to
Great
share
example.
the Wintel example? I think it's a great example you shared.
Yeah, so a couple of points. One is, of course, Wintel. In the heydays, a friend of mine from Intel said, he said, if you look at the aggregate profits, Microsoft makes about 80% of industry's profits. Intel makes 30%. Everyone else loses 10%. That's how you get to 100%. So in a way, that's, I think, very pertinent. And to expand on what Miten just said, really what you, by doing a lot of this, what you're really building is, in a way, think of it as a double moat. There is the water body, and then you have these thick walls which are there. So someone's got to penetrate both. And what are these two things? You have the industry's best customers, or the category's best customers, and you have the maximum spend that they are doing. What this is doing is leaving everyone else fighting for the long tail who may not even be profitable. And that's how you get to the 100% plus industry profits, because you force everyone else to actually lose money. That's the moat that we should think about.
And that's a compounding moat, right? If you're more profitable, you have more ability to invest in R&D, which means the next one will be better than the previous one. So it's a compounding moat, right? I'm more profitable. I'll invest in better. I'll hire better people. I'll do better marketing. I'll do everything. Just everything keeps getting compounding.
Microsoft was once asked that, one of the persons said that we believe that we should get a fair share of the market, and we believe fair share is 100%. So 100% share in customers is difficult, but 100% share of the profits actually is not that difficult now that we look at it.
That would have been a terrific note to end on. But Vivek, just want to turn it to you for one last question, which is for the people on this call. What's the next step to get started on this journey? I mean, is there a pilot possible? How does it work?
Yeah, so basically it's a very simple process. I think if you believe that few of your customers can give you most of your profits, and you can find more customers like that, and that thesis is something that you identify with, what we do is the partners is that they give us either hash data and SHA-256 format, or we just link to the customer audiences on Facebook. Based on that, do a small pilot, which is free, and just prove the theory. If you see the results of it, after that you can decide whether the thought that we have, what kind of action does it translate into. And it's a simple pilot which does sort of a A/B test with your existing incumbent strategy, and it works with your existing agencies or whoever you are working with. And at the end of that 15-day period, in this theory, what kind of delta it creates for you becomes fairly obvious. So I believe that, there should be zero friction in the transition, where you can just test out this theory into action. And the pilots we've done so far, we've had very, very exciting success.
Excellent. And that's a nice note to end on. So everybody, you know what you need to do. Reach out to Vivek, maybe through Archie, and get started with the cranking with the pilot. Thanks so much, Rajesh. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Miten. Lovely. Thanks, Vivek. Bye all. Thanks everybody who attended.
Thank you, Ajay. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, guys.